Listen up. If you think the world is what you see on the evening news, you're already lost. You're living in a curated hallucination, a sanitized, government-approved version of reality, where the bad guys wear black hats and the good guys always have pure intentions. But I've spent my life looking behind the curtain, into the dark code and the backroom deals that actually run this planet. And nowhere is the rot more evident than in the tragedy of Venezuela. It's a cautionary tale for the 21st century, a story of how a nation with more oil than Saudi Arabia and more potential than most of Europe was systematically dismantled, sold off to the highest bidder, and turned into a narco-state laboratory. We're going to talk about Nicolás Maduro, not the caricature you see on propaganda posters, but the man who turned a country into a prison and then acted surprised when the walls finally came down. To understand how he held a nation by the throat while his own people hunted for scraps in the street, you have to understand where the myth began. You have to understand the lie of the common man. It starts with the story they want you to believe. They call him the bus driver. It's the perfect proletarian fairy tale, isn't it? A simple man of the people, steering the masses through the streets of Caracas, rising to lead a revolution. Don't buy it. Nicolás Maduro wasn't a bus driver who became a politician. He was a political asset who used a bus as a cover. In 1986, Maduro didn't go to university. He went to Cuba. Specifically, he was sent to the Escuela Nacional de Cuadros. This wasn't a place for union organizing in the sense you or I understand it. It was a training ground for the Union of Young Communists. For a full year, Maduro was steeped in the Cuban intelligence G2 playbook. He was a mole, a long-term investment by the Castro brothers to ensure that if anything ever happened to the charismatic Chavez, Havana would still hold the remote control. Maduro's loyalty to Hugo Chavez was his only real talent. He wasn't the smartest, the most tactical, or the most beloved. He was the most obedient. While he was supposedly driving a bus for the Caracas Metro in the late 80s, he was busy founding Citra Meca, a union that served as a political battering ram. He wasn't looking for better wages. He was looking for a way to destabilize the existing order, and that destabilization found its commander in 1992. When a paratrooper named Hugo Chavez tried to take the country by force, Maduro wasn't in a uniform. He was the shadow in the streets, making sure the workers followed the lead. In 2006 through 2012, he served as foreign minister. His job? Aligning Venezuela with every anti-Western regime on the planet: Iran, Libya, Zimbabwe, and Belarus. He wasn't a diplomat. He was a bridge builder for a global anti-privacy, pro-authoritarian network. And in 2012, as Chavez's cancer became terminal, Maduro was moved to the vice presidency. The stage was set. When Chavez finally died in March 2013, Maduro didn't just inherit a presidency, he inherited a cult. But because he lacked Chavez's magic, he had to resort to the absurd. He famously claimed Chavez's ghost visited him as a little bird to give him his blessing. It was a litmus test. If the people would swallow that, they would swallow anything. Then came the April 14th, 2013 special election. The results were a statistical miracle for the regime. The result? Maduro won by a razor-thin 1.49%, just 224,000 votes. The fraud? Enrique Capriles, the opposition leader, reported over 3,200 irregularities. The CNE, Electoral Council, refused a full audit. The crackdown. When the people took to the streets to demand a recount, Maduro didn't talk. He hit. At least 9 people were killed in the immediate aftermath, and the government began using the judiciary to hunt down critics. Maduro stepped into the Miraflores palace with an empty head and a full mandate from Havana. Oil was at $100 a barrel, but the rot was already deep. He didn't know how to run an economy, so he did the only thing his Cuban handlers taught him: consolidate power. He didn't fix the leaks. He jailed the people pointing at them. He took a country that was already leaning toward the abyss
and gave it a violent shove. But as the oil prices began to wobble and the treasury started to run dry, Maduro realized that ideology wouldn't keep the generals happy. He needed something else. He needed a business, a dirty, global, multi-billion-dollar business. When the treasury runs dry, you don't find new investors, you find new partners. And in Maduro's case, those partners were the most violent men on the planet. This is where the state of Venezuela stopped being a country and started being a narco-fiefdom.
To understand how Maduro stayed in power while the rest of the country ate garbage, you have to understand the cartel of the suns. In Venezuela, generals wear suns on their epaulets instead of stars. By the time the oil price collapsed in 2014, those suns didn't represent military rank anymore. They represented territory. Maduro realized early on that a hungry soldier is a dangerous soldier, so he made them a deal. I won't pay you in bolívares, which are worth less than the paper they're printed on. I'll pay you in immunity. He handed the keys of the ports, the borders, and the airports to the military. According to the U.S. indictments unsealed just weeks ago in New York, Maduro and his inner circle didn't just look the other way. They were the logistics department. Imagine the Ministry of Defense rebranded as a shipping and receiving hub for the Sinaloa cartel. That wasn't a policy shift, it was a merger. Maduro turned the Venezuelan border into a safe haven for Colombian narco-terrorists. In exchange for weapons and protection, the FARC and ELN gave Maduro a cut of every kilo of cocaine that crossed the frontier. Think about the audacity. They weren't using go-fast boats like common thugs. They were using diplomatic passports and state-owned planes. They were moving cash from Mexico back to Caracas under the shield of sovereign immunity. When the U.S. clamped down on oil, Maduro moved south to the Arco Minero. He unleashed the military on the Amazon, using slave labor and toxic mercury to rip gold out of the earth. That blood gold was then laundered through Turkey and the UAE to keep the palace lights on. This wasn't just a government policy, it was a family enterprise. Look at Celia Flores. The 2026 superseding indictment explicitly names her as a key player who brokered meetings between large-scale traffickers and anti-drug officials. And then there's Maduro's son, who allegedly managed the transactions between the regime and the Sinaloa cartel. It's a classic mafia structure. Maduro sits at the top of the pyramid, not as a president, but as the capo dei capi. His ministers are just lieutenants in charge of different rackets, extortion, kidnapping, and the flow of white powder. By 2020, as the world locked down for a pandemic, Maduro was ramping up. He was moving an estimated 250 tons of cocaine a year. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. He built a system where the military was so deep in the blood that they couldn't turn on him without ending up in a DEA cage themselves. He didn't just corrupt the army, he chained them to his own fate. While the sons were getting fat on cocaine kickbacks and gold smuggling, the rest of the country was being cannibalized. You see, Maduro didn't just fail to feed his people. He used hunger as a precision-guided weapon. In any other country, if the shelves are empty, the government falls. In Maduro's Venezuela, if the shelves are empty, you own the people's stomachs. This is the era of the Maduro diet. It's a sick joke in the barrios, but the numbers aren't funny. By 2025, the average Venezuelan had lost 11 kilograms of body weight. Not because they were hitting the gym, but because a basic food basket, just enough to keep a family of 4 alive, cost 250 times the monthly minimum wage. To eat, you needed the fatherland card. It's a digital leash. If you protested, if you didn't vote for them, your card was deactivated. No food box, no medicine, no survival. It was the ultimate anti-privacy nightmare. Your very existence was a line of code in a government database that could be deleted with a keystroke. While 8 million people were walking across the Andes on bleeding feet, Maduro was in Istanbul, leaning back in a velvet chair while Salt Bae sliced gold leaf steak for him. That's the revolution. Steak for the masters, scraps for the slaves. That's nearly 25% of the entire population. Imagine a quarter of your country just vanishing. Those who stayed were left in a landscape of flickering lights and dry taps. By the end of 2025, 70% of hospitals didn't have regular running water. You don't perform surgery in those conditions. You perform miracles. And if you dared to complain, you met the Sabine, or the DGCIM. They have a place in Caracas called Helicoide. It was supposed to be a futuristic shopping mall, a spiral of glass and steel. Maduro turned it into a torture factory. Maduro had fun prosecuting his protesters. He invited the Operation Knock Knock. That was the name of his 2024 crackdown. What a sick joke. Security forces would mark the doors of opposition supporters with an X and snatch them in the night. And the victims? We're not just talking about politicians. We're talking about children. UN reports from late 2025 confirmed teenagers as young as 14 were held in the Helicoide, subjected to electric shocks and forced to record confession videos to avoid being disappeared forever. While the barrios were dark, the elite lived in Las Mercedes, a bubble of Ferraris, $30 cocktails, and high-speed internet. Maduro and his inner circle had an estimated $15 billion stashed in offshore accounts, crypto wallets, and Turkish gold. It's the ultimate irony of the socialist dream. Everyone is equal in their misery, except for the guy with the gun and the bus driver's mustache. He built a society where the only way to survive was to leave or to serve the cartel. He turned a nation of poets and engineers into a nation of refugees and prisoners. He thought he was untouchable behind his wall of generals and his Cuban spies. He was wrong, because even the most fortified cage has a key, and the US had been waiting a long time to turn it. By late 2025, the shadow economy wasn't just a Venezuelan problem. It was a global contagion. When the gold smuggling and the cocaine shipments started hitting ports in quantities that threatened the stability of the entire hemisphere, the wait finally ended. At 2 a.m. on January 3, 2026, while the world was sleeping off its collective hangover, the sky over Caracas didn't just break, it was dismantled. For years, Maduro thought his Russian-made S-300 shields and his circle of suns made him untouchable. He was wrong. He forgot that in the 21st century, iron is nothing compared to code. The US didn't just send a message. They sent a surgical, high-decibel masterclass in power projection. They called it Operation Absolute Resolve. It started with a whisper, a massive cyber offensive that turned the Venezuelan power grid into a useless tangle of copper. The invincible radar systems that Maduro paid billions for, they were fed a loop of empty skies while F-35s and stealth drones glided through the darkness like ghosts in the machine. Then came the kinetic part. This wasn't a slow-motion invasion, it was a decapitation. While their street thugs were hiding in the shadows, and the generals were busy trying to remember where they buried their gold, Delta Force and the 161st Special Operations Aviation Regiment, SOAR, were already on the ground. They hit his compound with the kind of precision that makes you realize just how small a strongman really is when the lights go out. They didn't find a revolutionary hero. They found a man who had spent a decade gorging himself on the blood of his nation, huddled with his inner circle, staring at blank monitors. The King of the Suns didn't go out in a blaze of glory. He was bum-rushed by operators who don't care about your ideology or your mustache. Within minutes, the man who held a nation hostage was blindfolded, zip-tied, and hauled onto a transport bird headed for the USS Iwo Jima. Fast forward 48 hours. The setting isn't a palace. It's a cold, fluorescent-lit federal courtroom in Brooklyn. The charges? Narco-terrorism, weapons smuggling, and conspiracy to flood the world with 250 tons of white powder a year. Maduro stood there in a standard-issue orange jumpsuit. No more presidential sashes, no more military parades, just another defendant. He pleaded not guilty, of course. They always do. But the game is over. The bus driver,
finally hit the end of the line. Now, give the US their props. It was a tactical masterpiece. It was clean, it was fast, and it removed a cancer that had been metastasizing for far too long. But don't let the fireworks distract you. Think. The US didn't spend billions on jet fuel and discombobulator tech just to play the Good Samaritan. They did it because Maduro was a security leak they couldn't plug and a competitor in the global shadow economy they couldn't control. The minute he was in the air, the liberators were already talking about stabilizing the energy markets. That's code for, we want the oil and we want it now. The dictator is in a cage. That is a win for every Venezuelan who ever went to bed hungry while the palace threw parties. But the machinery that allowed him to rise, the surveillance, the centralized control, the backroom deals, it's all still there. It's just under new management. Stay alert. Freedom isn't a gift handed to you by a superpower. It's a state of being you have to defend every single day. The King of the Suns is in Brooklyn, but the world is still full of shadows. Keep your eyes open. Watch who moves into the vacuum. And remember, you can't just delete a dictator and expect the system to be clean. The code of power is still running. You just have to decide who gets to write the next update.